Class disruptions, dissatisfied students, and in extreme cases, course failures could all be traced back to class policies. Our higher education system has norms and regulations that govern everything from class attendance to assignment submissions. Certain rules and conventions seem so obvious to some of us that we take them for granted. Yes, as teachers, we expect students to read our minds and to understand what our expectations are. But due to a variety of reasons, such as cultural differences, learning difficulties, miscommunications, and even gap years and overall rustiness, your students may need you to spell out the policies for them. At Teach Ahead, we try to help educators get ahead of different online teaching challenges. Through resources, courses, and video tutorials, we help teachers to be more proactive in their approach. So in today's video, we are going to cover classroom policies you need to establish for your higher education class. These policies will be specific to online teaching, but all of them will be applicable to in-person teaching as well. The point of this video is to help you to start the semester off on the right foot and to answer your students' queries before they even have to ask them. Number 1, late policy. It's important to have a clear late policy to maintain classroom order and respect for everyone's time. Remember, if you're teaching at the college or university level, a lot of those students are paying a lot of money and sacrificing a lot in order to be there. Your classroom is a shared space with diverse needs, but there are limited resources such as time. So for that reason, you want to ensure that time is not being disrupted by late students. If attendance and participation are baked into the overall grade of the student, then you can take notes on how late they are to your class. Otherwise, if this is not governed by departmental policies, then you may need to exercise your own discretion as a teacher based on your teaching style. You can let students come in as late as they want, or you can potentially have a 5-minute, 10-minute warmer at the beginning of each class. After that, students will have to wait until the halfway break in the class in order to attend. If you're teaching in person, it's a little bit more difficult to physically bar students from coming into your class, especially if so many of them are taking public transportation to commute to the campus. On the other hand, if we are talking about online education and you are conducting a class via Zoom, then it's a lot easier to just enable the wait room on Zoom and to let students come in on the break. Again, a lot of this is just grounded in your overall philosophy and beliefs as a teacher. So you could be as strict to this policy or as lenient as you wish. Policy number 2, attendance. An attendance policy underscores the importance of regular participation. You might require students to attend at least 80% of classes to pass, for example. This encourages consistent engagement and accountability. If you would like some tips on how to encourage your online students to come to class, check out this video. It's also important to reiterate the fact that attendance might not be directly tied to a student's grade, but it could be indirectly tied to their grade. By gaining access to on-the-spot feedback and support, video tutorials, and of course, the opportunity for bonus marks and tips on upcoming assignments, attending class could make a big difference in a student's overall grade. Unless if there are departmental policies that explain this in depth, you as the teacher are the one who gets to define what attendance means. If there are no direct attendance marks included in the grade breakdown for the course, you can incentivize students to come to your class on time and to participate by affording them certain privileges that other students do not get. For instance, perhaps you walk the students through the grading of a previous assignment at the beginning of each class. You can say that only students who attended the given class on time get to volunteer. Again, we go over more of these strategies in this video on motivating online students to attend classes. Number 3 is closely tied to number 1 and number 2. This is class participation policy. Encouraging active participation enhances learning. Your policy could specify that students must contribute to discussions at least once per week. This can be graded or used as the basis for extra credit. You can also focus on consistent participation throughout the class so that students don't participate for the first 5 minutes and then just ignore the chat afterwards. For example, if you are teaching online courses and you give your students an opportunity to earn bonus marks or extra credit, then you can say you will only retain these bonus marks if you participate throughout class. Participation could be based on voluntary voluntarily coming on the microphone or on being called upon to read off slides in a slideshow presentation. Be sure to focus on quality in addition to quantity when it comes to participation. And this feeds into number 4, group work or breakout room participation policy. Group work fosters collaboration, but clear guidelines are needed to ensure fair contribution. Consider a policy that requires students to report on each member's contributions. Peer evaluations could help to ensure that your students are interacting with one another. Now, if you're teaching online, then going around to the different breakout rooms, checking in with students, ensuring that their microphones are on and that they're communicating could be a good way to ensure that they are upholding the participation policy. Number 5, tech failure policy. Yes, it's very common for microphones and cameras to break. Some students live in more remote areas, and with online education, there could always be technical difficulties. Moreover, many students attend their online classes while they're on the bus or while they're at work. The degree to which you find this to be acceptable could depend on your participation policy. For example, are you okay with students only participating via the chat? Do you require students to come on the microphone and even to come on the camera and leave it on for the duration of the class? All of these elements factor into policy number 5, failed communication policy. If a student is unable to either turn their camera on, to communicate via the microphone, or even to communicate via chat, how should they let you know this and when should they let you know? For example, you may ask students in the first 5 minutes of class to send you a private message via Zoom, letting you know if they are unable to communicate via chat, or if they're unable to communicate via the microphone, or unable to turn their video on. You may or may not require an explanation for this. The choice is yours. It's incumbent on the student, who is an adult, to communicate with you. But in order to know that they have to do this, it's incumbent on you as the teacher to establish this policy. Otherwise, your students will attend class with a faulty microphone or camera and not expect to have to reach out to you about it. Number 6, late submission policy. Late submissions can disrupt grading schedules. At many colleges and universities, there will be set penalties for late submissions. For example, 10% per day or 2% per business day. However, realistically, a lot of students don't end up reading the guidelines from the department. So you should get ahead of this by communicating this to your students in the first class, and perhaps reiterate this a few more times throughout the semester for any students who have registered late. There are 2 aspects of a late submission policy you must consider. Number 1, how much of a grade deduction there will be for each day that it is late or each hour it is late. Number 2, how long will it be accepted after the deadline for this assignment? This second piece is commonly left out by teachers, but this could cause a problem because some students may expect to submit all of their assignments in the last week of the semester unless they are told otherwise. So it is important for you to indicate how long after a deadline assignments will be accepted. An example is that each day that an assignment is late, there will be 10% taken off the total mark, and an assignment will only be accepted up to 5 days past the due date. Be sure to check with your department head and the department resources if you are not sure about this. Otherwise, instate your own policies. Number 7, assignment extension request policy. Life happens. Flexibility is key. Have a policy for requesting extensions, like requiring students to ask at least 24 hours in advance with a valid reason. Have a clear policy for requesting extensions. Here are a few questions to consider. Number 1, if a student requests an accommodation or extension, do they need to provide you with a valid excuse? Number 2, how long before the assignment due date do they need to notify you requesting this extension? Number 3, if a student requests an extension after the deadline for requesting an extension, how much grace will they get? For example, let's say that with your college students, the students need to request an extension at least 24 hours prior to the deadline. In this case, will you exercise some leniency or will you be firm in the extension deadline policy? For example, if a student requests an extension late after the deadline, but they do provide a valid excuse, you could always compromise and say you will lose 1 day's worth of late penalty, but you can take an extra 3 days without additional penalties applied. Moving on, method of communication policy. Establishing a primary method of communication helps streamline interactions. Whether it's email, a learning management system, or office hours, clarity is key. Many students come from regions where the educational culture makes it more acceptable and actually encouraged to have face-to-face communication rather than email communication. For example, some of your students may approach you in person because in their home culture, it's seen as a sign of respect to approach the instructor face-to-face rather than approaching them online. To the contrary, a lot of professors would prefer to be emailed about something because that way they can read the email when they have time to do so. And then they have the time and the space to navigate to the LMS or through their emails to gather the information they need to respond to the student's email and their query with the best support possible. If students drop into your office or to your classroom expecting an impromptu on-the-spot meeting whenever they're ready for it, this could infringe upon the learning of other students. It could disrupt the class and it could cause a lack of order in the education process. With that being said, the extent to which you uphold this policy could depend on the severity of the situation, on the cultural background of the student, and on many other factors. In any case, spelling out the ideal conditions and modality of communication that you expect of the students could be a healthy way to start the semester. Many professors will know what it's like when students who have not attended class for the entire duration of the semester show up on the final class asking for accommodations. Establishing a line of communication via email early on in the semester could help to avoid certain issues, and it could make it so that students don't have to wait until the next synchronous meeting, such as the next class or the next time you have drop-in office hours. For more time-sensitive issues, email correspondence is preferable. Number 9, email etiquette policy. This is closely tied to the previous point. Teaching students professional email etiquette prepares them for the real world. Your policy might include guidelines on subject lines, greetings, and response times. It could also guide the student in understanding the level of tone you expect, the type of tone you expect them to communicate with, whether that be informal, semi-formal, or formal. If you would like to provide your student with a list of comprehensive examples of different types of emails, then you can direct them to Learn Ahead's course on writing emails. And you as the teacher could check out Teach Ahead's course on teaching email etiquette to your online students. A few examples of policies could be having the students expect a response within 48 hours during weekdays and not to send nudge emails. You can let the students know about the weekend email policy and how that might differ from weekday email policies, such as the expected wait time. You can give your students tips on how to clearly communicate via email, such as how to write clear subject lines. And finally, meeting policy. Clarify your availability for meetings. Decide whether they need to be scheduled or can be impromptu. A potential policy could be meetings should be scheduled via email at least 24 hours in advance. And that's it, folks. Those are 10 policies you should establish with your higher education learners at the beginning of the course. If you would like a big list of example policies and phrases you could use in those policies, check out this resource right here. We have hundreds of example policies that you could draw from, which are formatted into editable, downloadable documents that you could simply tailor to reflect your philosophy as a teacher, and of course, the context that you teach in. We will be making another video with another 10 policies you should implement as a higher education teacher. These will include topics such as plagiarism and academic integrity. If you have any suggestions of topics to include in this video, let us know in the description below. Thank you, and until next time, happy learning and happy teaching.